It is not a coincidence that states, civilizations, and the entire global civilization have, since ancient times, been likened to a ship. The Earth's globe, common to all of us, is a uniquely designed spacecraft that travels through lifeless space. Any major shipwreck is accompanied by specific mysticism that cannot be explained at the level of coincidences. Major shipwrecks are a kind of sign, warning to humanity from above. This is true, although not everyone comprehends and accepts this point of view. The origins of this phenomena lie, to all appearances, in ancient times. Atlantis, as a civilization that had exhausted God's allowance, was destroyed from above. At that time, the hierarchy of the elite and slaves was built by the elite through the non-technogenic impact on the living and on the course of events, magic, paranormal phenomena, etc. And then it was a ship, Noah's Ark, that was chosen as a saving island, the cradle of a reborn civilization. Our civilization is developing as a technogenic one, but with no less aim at eliminating the given by God equality of all living on earth. Any tragedy with ships casts ominous reflections on our future, symbolizes the next holes in the Noah's Ark of humanity.
Viktor Alexeyevich, what examples of clearly expressed mysticism in the sinking of ships could you give?
We can look through every marine tragedy, but it seems to me that in order to convince the radio listeners, in fantastic from the point of view of probability theory, chances, coincidences, it will be enough to turn to the fate of the Titanic and the circumstances accompanying its death. Let us make a reservation and say that in the work of the internal predictor of the USSR, Russian society, and the death of the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk, it is shown that both mysticism and tragic coincidences are in fact military actions of supranational systems of governance with the help of egregorial magic. The Titanic project itself symbolizes the erroneousness of the civilizational course. It was an unbelievably expensive project at the time. The liner was 269 meters long, it had 29 boilers, and the consumption of coal was approximately 850 tons per day. The Titanic was created predominantly for the cream of society. A seaman from the same Titanic would have to work almost all his life to purchase such a ticket. Let us touch upon the most important element of the mysticism that happened with the Titanic. It should be noted that mysticism is a part of the not comprehended by us reality, some objective laws that do not fit into the generally accepted stereotypes. So in 1898, the American novel by Morgan Robertson, The Wreck of the Titan or Futility, was published. In this novel, to the smallest detail, everything that was to happen 14 years later with the Titanic was described. The only difference was that the giant liner, more than 1/4 of a kilometer long, which perished in a collision with an iceberg, was not called Titanic in Robertson's novel, but Titan. It is obvious for those who understand the principles of the work of the highest reason, the highest hierarchical encompassing governance, that from above, through Robertson, humanity was given a warning about an erroneous civilizational course. However, this warning was ignored. Moreover, as is known, 2 more ships, the Olympic and the Britannic, were built according to the British project of the Titanic. The Olympic received a hole incompatible with life during its first year on the water, on September 20th, 1911. The Britannic sank on November 21st, 1916, off the coast of Greece. At the same time, by mystical, as they say, chance, she received exactly the same hole as the Titanic. This chance connection of all these 3 shipwrecks is also curious. On each of these 3 ships, at the time of their death, there was a nurse, Violet Jessup, who was not injured, nor did she receive a single scratch. I think that after these examples, the radio listeners will understand why Alexander Pushkin called chance that powerful and instantaneous instrument of providence. Our team regards the sinking of the Titanic as a symbol of the inconsistency of biblical civilization, the impending collapse of the biblical conception of governance. The salvation of humanity is possible only on the path of transition to the conception of social safety, dead water, worked out in Russia.
And what marine tragedies do you consider symbolic in our history?
Significant tragedies with our ships have always happened in interconnection with some turning historical events. On the roadstead of Sevastopol, on October the 7th, 1916, the battleship Imperatrica Maria exploded and sank. There were numerous casualties. The investigation reached a dead end. The commission of the investigation was ashamed to directly state that sabotage was the cause of the sinking, noting only that numerous violations of the rules of the organization of service on the ship had affected the death. The death of the battleship Imperatrica Maria was soon followed by the 1917 revolution. In the era of Stalin, there were no tragedies of this magnitude with the ships of the Soviet Navy, and this is also significant. On October the 28th, 1955, in Sevastopol, after the second underground echelon of the Trotskyist mafia had eliminated Stalin, the battleship Novorossiysk was blown up. The act of the State Commission on the reasons for the explosion was full of lies. The innocent were punished, although the head of the State Commission saw the destruction of the ship, and as a defense engineer, he could not have but understood that this was not at all about the mine left after the war. But there were some not technical but political mafia factors, under the pressure of which he lied and hid the fact of sabotage. The military, marine and land, public, and the special services silently swallowed this lie, maintaining loyalty to a lying regime. In 1985, the biblical directors, through its periphery, began a perestroika alien to the genetics of our people. Almost immediately, in April 1986, there was that disaster in Chernobyl. At the end of August, the death with many victims of the passenger liner Admiral Nakhimov, after a collision with the cargo ship Pyotr Vasyev. And on October the 6th, 70 years later almost to the day of Imperatrica Maria, the death of the strategic ballistic missile nuclear-powered submarine K2-19. According to our information, in a submerged position, she collided with the US nuclear-powered submarine, which was carrying out close tracking of her. However, the United States denies this fact. As a result of the collision, the hermetism of the missile tubes was broken. A missile was destroyed, as a result of which there was an outpouring of the components of missile fuel into a tube, which was accompanied by an explosion. In 1989, there was that sinking of the nuclear-powered submarine Komsomolets. A kind of hint question from the higher-ups of the biblical project. Mr. Gorby, so are you for democracy and disarmament under the conceptual power of the doctrine of Deuteronomy Isaiah? Or are you for communism without perversions of it, which we wrote off on J.B. Stalin? Mr. Gorby, if he didn't understand it, he felt what was going on, and he betrayed the people, submitted to the moral psychological dictate of the higher-ups of the biblical project. Soon, under his supervision, follows the state collapse of the USSR and the elimination of all the gains of the laboring people during the years of building socialism achieved under the leadership of J.B. Stalin. Almost 10 more years passed. No sooner had the new president become the head of statehood in Russia than the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk perished. What is expressed in this sequence of significant tragedies? Mysticism? A fatal convergence of coincidences? In our opinion, Kursk and all the subsequent events are a new hint ultimatum presented not only to Putin, but also to the whole of Russia, presented by the higher-ups of the biblical project of the enslavement of all humanity. This is a continuation of politics, not state, but supranational, behind-the-scenes mafia politics, carried out by the hierarchs of secret initiations and their periphery.
On what basis do you make such harsh conclusions? After all, according to the results of the investigation, Kursk perished by accident.
In the entire history of the fleet, the public has not been presented with a single objective conclusion on the reasons for the tragedies that occurred. Kursk is no exception. Intuitively, the relatives of the deceased are especially clearly aware of this, as well as all specialists who are in the slightest degree versed in the strength of materials. But the Kursk tragedy also exposes the innovations used by the pseudo-Zhrezes. They worked out the technology for the laying of the groundwork for future catastrophes. The relatives of the deceased seamen were gathered in Vidyayevo. Many journalists expressed bewilderment about this, since it is well known from psychology and from the experience of disaster medicine that uniting relatives of victims in one place, for most of them this only aggravates individual stress. That is, it was a bad thing in relation to the relatives of the deceased. However, this was done deliberately in order to enhance the effectiveness of egregorial magic. Not only were the relatives gathered in one place, the attention of the whole country was attracted to this. And during the stay of the people in Vidyaeva, many of whom were grief-stricken and demoralized, a specific egregor of grief, hopelessness and catastrophe managed to form. After they left for their places of permanent residence, this egregor spread almost throughout the entire country, creating the potential of an egregorially governable catastrophe of a nationwide scale. In this sense, Kursk is the clearest illustration of these algorithms. The current countless daily catastrophes, planes, helicopters, explosions of houses, are a direct consequence of the egregor formed in Vidyaeva. The entire course of the investigation into the causes of the death of the Kursk, from beginning to end, has only one clearly expressed logic: the desire to hide from society the true causes of what happened. And this concealment tactic has revealed itself since the moment the tragedy began. The area of the military exercise was controlled by our surface ships, and they simply could not have but found the coordinates of the most powerful explosion at the location of our submarine. Nonetheless, the alarm began to sound allegedly only from the moment the submarine did not come on the radio for the next communication. The underwater footage of the bow section taken by the Mir submersibles from the academic Mstislav Kildish vessel was hidden from our society under the seal of secrecy, but was shown in Holland on November 23, 2000. The underwater footage was first shown by Reuters. We have studied that footage and dare to assert that the many fragments presented on it are purpose-orientedly selected so that nothing can be said about the causes of the catastrophic destruction.
And what specifically was supposed to be shown, so that the society itself could judge about the causes of the catastrophe?
They were supposed to show only one frame of footage, which would capture the entire panorama of the destruction perimeter, where the ship's structures turned into twisted metal. If the explosion is internal, then everything is bent outward. If it is external, then everything is bent inward. If the external explosion entailed an internal one, then, against the background of the destruction from the inside, traces of the external explosion remain. It is the view of the perimeter of the destruction zone that is a secret sealed with all the ostentatious publicity of the investigation. To hide this perimeter, to conceal the true causes of this catastrophe, the bow of the submarine, which would make everything secret clear, is separated.
What, in your team's opinion, is the true cause of the catastrophe?
We managed, by comparing and correlating openly published data, to find for ourselves the only plausible version. According to our version, the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk was sunk by a salvo of combat torpedoes from a NATO submarine, which was secretly located in the exercise area. The confirmation of this version is visual in nature, and I will not try to bring this to the radio listeners in words. It is very difficult. In a nutshell, the scenario writers did not work cleanly, and we were able to detect clearly highlighted traces of an external explosion. All arguments, including the videos, are posted in one of the monthly analytical notes of the conceptual analytical group known as the Internal Predictor of the USSR. In the near future, we will release a book where the truth about the Kursk tragedy will be revealed. According to our version, the released training torpedo of the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk in the active target search mode, instead of a training target, tracked the secretly placed NATO submarine, and, having changed the trajectory, the torpedo went towards the NATO submarine. The submarine, which was on duty, received a torpedo attack signal. Whether it was a training torpedo or a combat torpedo, the NATO submarine of course did not know. In this standard situation, in the interaction of technology and man, perhaps in an unintentional mode, a defensive response salvo of 4 torpedoes was fired. One of them exploded at the non-contact bearing of our attacking torpedo. Nonetheless, our torpedo apparently caused mechanical damage, even though it was not a combat one. Hence the reports of foreign emergency buoys and the recorded movement of the damaged submarine to a repair dock in Norway. 2 torpedoes exploded in a contact manner in a collision with the bow of the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk, after which the submarine's own ammunition might have detonated, and the fourth torpedo exploded in a non-contact detonation of the fuse, having damaged, in particular, the coaming platform of the escape hatch of the ninth compartment, making it impossible for the crew members of Kursk to exit through it. The possibility of a self-active internal explosion of a torpedo is structurally almost completely ruled out. As experience shows, including the experience of the war years, torpedoes in the tubes exploded due to the fact that they were directly hit by torpedoes or other weapons.
Viktor Alexeyevich, but how, in your opinion, could the use of weapons against our submarine occur?
For this, I would like to refer to the independent military review of the Russian independent newspaper dated January the 21st, 2000. It was called Sea Wolves and Surface Ferrets. I will quote this review. According to the sum of its characteristics, the American nuclear-powered submarine of the fourth generation, Sea Wolf, should be recognized as the best submarine of the outgoing century. While it is extremely difficult to detect the noises of the Sea Wolf, as already noted, she herself, however, hears very well, thanks to 7 acoustic antennas. This information is processed by the Automatic Combat Management System, ACMS, into which all the submarine's electronic systems are integrated. The ACMS detects the coordinates of the target and gives a signal to use a weapon. According to the officers of the submarine, the ACMS sometimes provides such a volume of information that they are just learning to operate. This statement sounds ominous since 52 weapons, torpedoes of various types and Tomahawk cruise missiles are placed on board the Sea Wolf, and in case of errors in control, it is very likely to be accidentally used. This quote gives one of the variants of the answers to the question of how the use of weapons against the nuclear-powered submarine Kursk could occur. In essence, this article contains the confession of the Americans themselves that they have entrusted everything to automation, as a result of which the use of the Sea Wolf weapon in some circumstances may be unauthorized. Where were the submarines of this type on the 8th of December 2000? How did they report their ammunition usage upon their return? In addition, the past 2 years have shown that the activities of the State Commission investigating the catastrophe, or pretending that this is exactly what it is doing, especially its provision of information to society, is seemingly unsystematic, inconsistent, and internally contradictory in nature. But the feeling of this meaninglessness disappears if it is correlated with the general course of political events in the world. At the end of October 2000, it was officially announced that the next meeting of the State Commission would be held on November the 9th at the Rubin Central Design Bureau for Marine Engineering, at which the causes of the Kursk's death would be announced. On November the 8th, 2000, the results of the presidential elections were to be announced in the United States. Bush and Gore represented rival teams, and what was important for one to be kept secret could be revealed by his opponent. But on November the 8th, a manual recount began. Accordingly, on November the 9th, there were no reports that the State Commission was going to come or had come to some conclusions about the causes of the death of the Kursk. In conclusion, I would like to note that the death of the Kursk symbolizes the categorical unacceptability for Russia of the biblical enslavement that is actively imposed on us. Relying on our own conception, we must take our own course, leaving behind all the absurdity, all the catastrophic, tragic nature of our present being.